This is the city, Los Angeles, California. I work here. I'm a cop. It was Tuesday, October 9th. It was raining in Los Angeles. We were working bunco. We headed back to get coffee at the station when we received a frantic call from Mrs. A. Green, who lived at 12111 Sycamore Lane. Mrs. Green was seriously distraught. You see, Mrs. Green grows her own ingredients: tomatoes, squash, chili peppers, you name it. Someone apparently had trampled through Mrs. Green's garden, breaking some very valuable plants that she had been nurturing from tiny seedlings. These plants had grown into what were going to be her contributions to the Los Angeles State Fair. The pumpkins were large, orange, and weighed almost 50 pounds each. Although Mrs. Green was apparently very distraught about the pumpkins, she was also seriously upset because some young punk had stolen her entry, her blue ribbon prize-winning annual pumpkin pie from her windowsill. I dropped everything I was doing, grabbed my notebook, and drove to the outskirts of town to Mrs. A. Green's modest house on Sycamore. Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to see is true. Only the names have been changed to protect the innocent. We arrive at the home of Mrs. A. Green. Forensics begins to do a sweep of the trampled and destroyed vegetable garden, while I join Mrs. Green at the kitchen table, where she offers me some delicious pastry and killer coffee. I break out my notebook, and she tells me the gruesome details. Apparently, she had worked enslaved kneading and cutting and chopping and sauteing and baking her annual prize-winning, state fair-winning pumpkin pie. She had placed it on her windowsill in the kitchen and had gone out to run some errands. Upon her return, all she found were a few crumbs in an empty plate. Needless to say, Mrs. A.A. Green is extremely shaken and visibly upset. My partner and I assure her we'll do everything in our power to catch this despicable little punk who did this to her. I finished my pastry and thanked Mrs. A.A. Green of Sycamore Lane. Upon interviewing Mrs. A.A. Green's neighbor, she saw a visible ruffling and rustling inside the garden of Mrs. A.A. Green. She thought she heard loud lip-smacking, slobbering, scratching noises, which she attributed to Mrs. Green's pet puppy. Upon closer inspection, we find visible fingerprints on Mrs. A.A. Green's windowsill. We're about to head back to the office as soon as we lift these prints, and I assure Mrs. A.A. Green that we're on the case and we're going to catch the punk who did this to her. interviewed as many people as we could and turned up a few prospects. We'll start with Sticks. Sticks was a petty punk criminal with minor shoplifting charges and a wide-eyed stare that gave everyone the impression that he was afraid of his own shadow. Shades. Shades tried to disguise himself, but it didn't work. The green glasses and pebbles ponytail, neatly trimmed mustache gave him away. We interviewed this petty little criminal and found out he had an alibi. He was visiting his mother on the day in question. Rocky. Rocky is a very ingenious criminal. He's been known to dye his hair different colors, wear wigs. He tries to disguise his face and will use any method to try to create an alibi. Turned out we ran his prints and Rocky was cleared of any wrongdoing. Mo Green. Mo Green is a distinctive wise guy. He runs the entire south side of the city. He has a very visible fang on the right side of his face. He hides all his illegitimate activities under the guise of running an olive oil distribution company. Luke Brasi. Luke Brasi gives himself away every time because he cannot seem to control his voracious appetite. Of course, we located him at the local Italian restaurant where he protested being brought in and refused to stop eating the spaghetti dinner he was eating at the time of his arrest for questioning. Jimmy Two Times. Jimmy Two Times is a two-face, and he will think on anybody, get himself out of trouble. He has a background of shoplifting, vandalism, and trespassing. They call him Jimmy Two Times because he repeats everything 2 times. The Iceman. The Iceman may be small in stature, but he's a force to be reckoned with. He has a long rap sheet, including distribution of illegal biscuits and bones. However, Iceman is powerful enough that he would not have to resort to committing such a petty crime as eating a pumpkin pie. The Fanucci brothers, what can I say? They are wily and hard to pin down. They work for Mo Green and are considered to be very dangerous individuals. The Finucci's own a large warehouse on the other side of town where they front bones and treats for the likes of the Iceman. Bugsy tries to play off as a cute, sweet, innocent little boy, but he is a mastermind. His obvious size is due to the fact that he likes to frequent restaurants in the area and dine and dash. We're still trying to pinpoint where he was on the day in question and checking out his alibi that he was at his girlfriend's house on the day of question. Beans originally is from Boston, Mass. He's pretty sly, and his sense of hearing is remarkable. He could hear the cars pulling up from a mile away. We found him hiding underneath the sofa where he put up a brave little fight. So now he sits in county jail for obstructing and resisting. The backwoods boys don't let their appearance fool you. These guys are conniving, and they know how to get around in this town. Everyone says the backwoods boys are actually a very large organization. They defend each other no matter what, and have been inseparable since birth. Chopper is what we call an American bully. He's a true California native. He frequents the LA area, although he is quite handsome. His alibi isn't really checking out right now. Prints that we lifted are all pointing at him. So every interview we've done and add the Latin prints we lifted indicates that Chopper is our number one suspect. When he was just a youngster, he began committing crimes. He refuses to talk, so we'll be bringing in Mrs. A.A. Green for the police lineup, and we're hoping to put this case to bed. Mrs. A.A. Green reported to the precinct. As soon as Mrs. Green saw the suspects, she ruled everyone out but Chopper. Mrs. Green felt sorry that he had to resort to such dastardly acts as eating her prize-winning pumpkin pie. The other suspects were released from custody, Chopper remains in LA County Jail, awaiting